Well, welcome everyone. I'm very happy that you could join us today. Before we get started, our Xpey Wellness team wants to begin by acknowledging and honoring the diverse Coast Salish nations that we work with and whose territory we reside in. And so our team is made up of a group of people with roots and ancestries in different nations and cultures. But we do acknowledge that when we show up to do this work, and within these communities, we're doing so as guests. And so we're very honored to do that. Quickly, our team, the Xpey Wellness team, is made up of Bianca Elliott, myself, my name is Harley MacArthur, and Marco Caffiero. And throughout this series, we've been working with Larissa Koser she's the Respecting Tobacco Coordinator with the First Nations Health Authority. And so welcome back. This is part 7 of the Promoting Resiliency series. It's a 9-part webinar series in total, and it's been a collaboration between Xpey Wellness and First Nations Health Authority Respecting Tobacco program. And why we've been doing this, the theme of this whole thing is grounding our health in Indigenous ways of self-care. And so we wanted to focus on sharing Indigenous ways of supporting our well-being during this whole pandemic, but also beyond that. And so today I'm very excited that we are joined by JC Lucas and Nola Jeffrey. And we're going to be talking about how to quit commercial tobacco use. Before I pass it over to them, I just want to remind everyone of Zoom etiquette. So please keep your mics muted throughout this webinar. If you do have questions throughout, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and I'll make sure that JC and Nola hear them. And just so you know, the webinar is being recorded and it's being broadcasted to Facebook as well. Very quickly too, one last thing is that we want to make sure that what we're doing is meaningful and that it's what you want to see. So if you could take a few minutes at the end to fill out our survey, it would mean a lot to us. And so right now I'll pass it over to JC to open us up with a prayer.
I'm just introducing myself in my language. That was a big problem in where I went to school, my language. So I'm just going to do a little chant and explain the chant and why I'm using the chant. My name is Nuu-Chah-Nulth from the Hesquiaht band, Sea Serpent Clan. And I was introducing myself in my language, the Nuu-Chah-Nulth area, but I live in Nanaimo in the Coast Salish area, in the Snuneymuxw really happy to be invited here to have a chance to share. And it's difficult to share regularly in this COVID time in the normal way. I've had a few opportunities to be with people in a safe way. And tobacco is one of the great medicines of this lifetime, earthly life that we have. We use tobacco in the sweat lodge. We use tobacco in picking plants. We use tobacco in our sacred pipes. And it's considered to be one of the first plants on earth. It carries a great, great thing. They don't have it in the spirit world. They have everything else. So when we use it here and offer it to them, they're extremely happy. And this life was meant for health and happiness, and it's really difficult when you've been traumatized or ostracized or prejudiced against to be normal inside. There's an anxiety inside that causes, that's a result of that prejudice and all those things. And I'll just stop there for a minute while I let Nola introduce herself again. And thank you, Nola, for inviting me here. Thank you all.
Thank you, JC. Harley, thank you for opening us up and welcoming us. And JC, thank you for the prayer. And what you guys don't know is I can smell, JC obviously uses the rattle and the flute in the sweat ceremony. So I can smell that it's been in the sweat, which is a really, really beautiful smell. I can smell the smoky smell to it. So really, JC and I are at Tsow-Tun Le Lum, and Tsow-Tun Le Lum is in Coast Salish territory.
Nola, can you hear me? You seem to be frozen. I don't know if anyone else can hear me or. Nola? Oh. Oh. They're gone. I can hear. Okay, so maybe let Larissa, would you be able to call them and see if, let them know that they've gone off the call? Okay. Sorry, we've about the technical difficulties.
Harley, oh, where's that?
Yep.
There? Yeah, I see her. Maybe she's
Yep.
calling them.
Yep.
Okay. We I guess we just lost our presenters.
Have they reconnected?
No.
No.
Not in the waiting room? Okay.
Oh no, and Nola turned her phone off.
Oh, that's right.
And put it in the desk. Maybe JC still has his on.
There they are.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
You
I
can't.
was like,
Oh, there you go.
I was going to say maybe that was the ancestors giving us the food over here. I'm not sure. I was in a little panic because I almost didn't get back on. I was ready to call. So anyway, I was talking about the ancestors, and I'll properly introduce myself. So my name is Nola Jeffrey. I'm Tsimshian and Coast Salish. I was born and raised in a little village about 20 miles north of Prince Rupert called Xpey. I come from the Gitindah tribe out of the house of Hesquiaht. I'm the youngest of 9 children. My parents are the late Bobby and Fred Dudeward. My maternal grandparents are Mercy Kelly and Robert Garner, and it's through Robert Garner that I have my Coast Salish blood. And on my father's side, his mother is Frida Dudeward and his father was Frank Goodenough. I'm married, and I've been married for 43 years. And so I tell people I was 7 when George and I got together. Anyway, we have 4 children, 3 that are living and 5 grandbabies. And one of my most important roles in my life is to be a good Gigi, to be a good grandmother. I've had the honor and privilege of working at Tsow-Tun Le Lum for over 20 years in many, many capacities. And I'm currently the executive director, and I'm hopefully one day I can sit as an elder or a cultural support person. That's my next vision or next role. So really, really happy to be here with you guys this morning. So thank you.
Thank you both so much for being here. I guess my first question, just really easy. Can you tell us about how you stopped smoking commercial tobacco?
Oh, I stopped several times. I sobered up in 1980, in May 1980 at around Lake Treatment Center, and quit smoking when I quit drinking. And then I started up again a few years later when my dad passed away, and then quit again, and then started again. But the last time I smoked, I think was in 86 or 7, something like that. But I wrote down all the reasons I shouldn't use tobacco like that, the sacredness of it, the medicine of it, and why I was so uneasy inside. As I looked at my residential school days and the drinking of adults around me when I was little, and the uneasiness it brought inside of myself. And then tobacco eased that. And back then I didn't know that it was a sacred medicine. And I shared it with a priest that was kind of like the director of Kakawas Family Development Center. And he said, "Can I use that?" Because he smoked too, and then he quit. And using all those things I wrote down about why how it was for me personally, but he wanted to use it, so he did. And my dad chain smoked all his life. He lived to be 83, almost 84. And so we were always breathing it in the house, and it was a natural hook for me just to pick it up, because I still hadn't resolved all the things inside of myself about the uneasiness, the traumas, and the pains that the cigarette helped. So realizing my own sacredness was a big part of that I shouldn't abuse myself by using tobacco. I don't want to sound like I'm preaching. I'm just telling you my story of how I realized how sacred I was, how all life was sacred, and that tobacco was one of the chief healers in creation. And it was an amazing realization when I fully grasped it. The last time I quit smoking, I don't even remember how or what year. I just stopped. And I know it's a difficult thing to do. I've seen people with their fists clenched or their claws out when they're trying to quit. I was blessed to realize the sacredness of it and to take that in fully. I'll just stop there for a minute and let you want to say anything.
Do I want to say? The question is, how did I stop using commercial tobacco?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I quit cold turkey is how I did it, but I'd quit. Like JC, I started smoking late in life and used it as a coping mechanism for stress. I actually remember we moved to the island and I started smoking because I had to move us on our own. And then my neighbor smoked, so I just kind of continued. And anytime I've quit, I have quit cold turkey. And at one point, I remember I quit for 5 years and honestly didn't think I'd ever pick up again. And I did. Like JC, my dad got sick and he got sick with lung cancer. So it's really interesting that I chose to go to cigarettes, but I did. It was something my family members did. We did it together. It was a social thing, but it also helped. There is something it really does do for in your brain to help calm your system down. So I did use it as a coping mechanism, and I think it's about 10 years and 9 months. I just added it up on my fingers just before we started that I have stopped. And I'm never going to ever say I think I've kicked the habit now, because it's something that's really easy to go back to. And I was saying earlier, honestly, if cigarettes weren't harmful for you, if they didn't have all the chemicals in it, and if it didn't cause illness, I probably, and didn't harm my lungs, because it definitely, my lungs could feel it. Like, it really did affect me physically. I probably would still smoke. So, but it is harmful, and it was harmful to me. And so I did quit cold turkey. And yeah, probably that first week was really, really hard. Sometimes even now when I'm stressed, I feel like I want a cigarette, but I can get past that because I've learned other coping mechanisms to help me with that.
Yes, thank you. And I hope you don't mind me asking, before we went live, you had mentioned that, cigarettes was like, it calmed you, and someone had asked you, well, why don't you find anything, what can you replace it with, right? So what, cigarettes. So do you mind sharing about like what that was for you?
So I mentioned when I introduced myself, I have 4 children and 3 that are living, and our baby girl died in a car accident when she was 20 months old, and cigarettes helped me cope with the grief, helped me cope with the stress. And I really believe that it helped me stay here. And it was my daughter. So in this field, and obviously I guess I passed techniques onto her, and counseling techniques or whatever it was. So she used, I guess she used my own medicine on me, and just said, Mom, so if cigarettes help you stay here, why don't you find something else that you can replace for the cigarettes, because they're causing you harm, that can help you stay here. And I was like, darn. And she was right. I started really using exercise. I was able, there were a few things. One was my granddaughter asking me, and she was just little, asking me to stop. She was probably only, she was 2 at the time, because she's just over 12 now. So she asked me to stop too. And so, there was a few things in my own health that helped me make that decision. And I'm hoping it's a decision that is my life decision now. But like I said, I quit for 5 years before. I never thought I would go back. So this time it's almost 11 years. In January, it'll be 11 years.
Congrats on it almost being 11 years. I just wanted to bring that up because, JC mentioned that he realized his own sacredness. And so, and you have mentioned it as a coping mechanism. And I think right now, as we're all living in a pandemic, people are trying to cope the best that they can. And whether that's healthy or unhealthy habits, you know, this might increase people that are going to be smoking. And so, yeah, I just wanted to highlight that because it kind of seems like there's some deeper like understandings. You know, it's not just like we can get the nicotine patch and these tools to help us quit, but it sounds like for both of you, there was a deeper sort of understanding that you went through that helped you stop.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Any questions?
So so we know that like people smoke in First Nations communities, the rate is higher compared to the general population. And I'm wondering if you think there's a way we can switch this narrative, or, you know, what we need to do to kind of address that.
Well, I think JC had talked about it earlier when he was talking about residential school. He was talking about trauma, and as First Nations people, I think most of us know our history, so that we know that we have compounded or historical trauma, but probably almost all of us. I haven't met anyone that's Indigenous that hasn't experienced their own trauma. And so and I think, you know, we grew up with cigarettes around us. I grew up with people smoking in our home. It was a natural, normal thing. And back then, because I'm really old, you guys, back then people didn't realize the harm that cigarettes caused. They didn't. And so it was normal. And it's only, I want to say, in the last 20 or 30 years that people realize the harm of it. But still, that's not enough because it's an unseen harm too, right? People don't really realize until, like myself, my lungs, even though I wasn't what you would consider a heavy smoker, I probably smoked between 4 to 6 cigarettes a day. My lungs, I'm prone to asthma, so my lungs couldn't handle it. And I think until something, or my dad was a smoker his whole life and got cancer. And when he got cancer, I started smoking. How smart is it? It's really not smart, but it's something that we use to help us cope with all the difficult things. And just like my daughter had said to me, we need to find something that's healthier for us to use to cope with. So you're right, during this pandemic, for all of us, for all people, but I think especially for us as First Nations or Indigenous or whatever it is they're calling us nowadays, and I identify as Tsimshian and Coast Salish, I think we have that added, it's an added factor, because it hasn't been that long ago that we've suffered chemical warfare. That, you know, that smallpox was put out there and our people died from that, and lots of our people. So I believe that's in our blood memory. And so we become, our whole system goes on high alert, looking for the danger. And so we need things, and there is something that is, unfortunately, that cigarettes does give us to help us calm down our nervous system. But because there's so much chemicals in it, it is really, really harmful to us, and we don't see that. So we need to find those kind of, like, you know, I wish I had found what JC had found about the sacredness of who I am, and maybe in my way I did, but because of my children and my grandchildren, to know, you know, how sacred we are, and to know that this is tobacco really is medicine, but it's the pure tobacco that's medicine, and not the stuff that's just full of chemicals. And it was done in a ceremonial way. And I hear people saying when they're going out for a cigarette, I'm going out to smudge, but really they're not. That they just use that because they do know it is medicine. Like, part of them knows that it is medicine and that it is sacred. So I think we have to learn to start dealing with the trauma that we hold inside of us. We need to be able to release it. We need to be able to connect. And lots of us have live in beautiful places where we have the land there, that we can go to the land, we can go to the ocean, we can go to the rivers, we can go to the mountains, and to use those things, just like my daughter had said, and I started going running back then to help us cope. But I think it's really, really normal, because it's not just cigarettes, right? It's the alcohol, it's the drugs, it's all of those other ways that we found that help lessen the pain that we carry and help us to face each day. And it's about doing that healing work now to find ways that we can face each day without depending on things that cause us harm, cause us more harm. Because really our goal is to help ourselves, help to calm ourselves down, help us to feel better. And we're not trying to use these things to cause more problems in our life, but that is what happens. Do you want to add to that?
Sure. My thoughts, I still use tobacco and I carry a sacred pipe, but it's a mixture of not just traditional tobacco, but other things that's really good for the soul and good for the lungs, good for your whole being. And the grandfathers really, really love it when you use tobacco in a good way, like it was meant for. And getting back to the sacredness and the beginning of time, this was one of the first sounds that were heard in the beginning of creation. There's a sound like that. And tobacco also is from the beginning. And so when I go to my own beginning, my dear parents and grandparents that helped get me here to begin my journey, I have a purpose. I'm not against anything, I'm for life. And if a person still smokes, maybe it's still really comforting for them. So I say just, I hope that people can find the real meaning in life by finding themselves. They say when you really investigate and look at yourself, you find yourself in that same instant, you find the Great Spirit, and you generally find your purpose in life. So my purpose in life is to be trying to help people. I've been given a few gifts here and there along the way, and I like to share that in a good way without preaching. And I'm sorry if I sound like I'm preaching, but it's the fact of life. The age that we live in is on a big scale kind of godless, and you're pushed towards materialism day after day from the beginning, children born today. So the sacredness of life is more or less left out. So for myself, investigating that and investigating it honestly, investigating religion and culture, I'm still clean and sober today, and I'm quite happy. And I know people that are dying of cancer, and it's touching, very touching to know that we can still try and help people to identify who they are and what this great medicine tobacco is for. I usually use 4 sacred chief healers in the sweat lodge. That's cedar, sweetgrass, sage, and tobacco. 4 chief healers, but I use others, of course. But those 4 I generally use over the years, and it's really helped me and other people. So thank you again for having me here to share a little bit here, because it's a topic that we can share and talk about for a long time. But in this age of Zoom, I don't want to get Zoom fatigue again. I had Zoom fatigue last week. Sure, good for now.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah. And, you know, something I find it that we can't, you know, we can't just talk about like quitting commercial tobacco or, you know, it's not just a separate thing. It's tied into like addiction of like alcoholism, drug abuse. And so you had mentioned like how we address that is through connection and dealing with the trauma that we've been through. And so, you know, before I asked you how your work has changed since, you know, this pandemic has come, but, you know, for people right now that are isolated or at home, like how can we, you know, share this information with them or like talk, you know, have people to realize like that they're sacred and just kind of like foster that sense of connection?
Well, I think this webinar is helping. I know Tsow-Tun Le Lum has a Facebook. We also have a phone line, but if people don't have access to that, and some don't, some people live in very, very remote areas, it's a good question. It's a really good question because we're meant to be social beings. And this being cut off, this isolation, again, is really, really difficult, especially when you're talking about residential school survivors, or so many of our families were separated and broken because of colonization, and people never went back to their communities, so they got cut off that way. But I think within BC, unless you live in a big city, but I think you still have access to be able to go out and connect with nature. And so, and finding people in your community that have teachings, but I think all of us have that within us. JC talked about how sacred we are, and I know we feel like a lot was lost because there was that disconnect. But I think things do come to us. And if we try to be open to it, they can come to us in our dreams. It can come to us in our thoughts. So I don't think things are truly lost. I think we just need to know where to find them, and it has to start here. It's the only place it can start is right here with me right now. And like JC, you know, I think when people are ready, they're going to find their way. I think when people want to reach out, I'm hoping that somebody is going to be there, somebody that can, because really what we need is someone that can listen to us and also have that empathy and that understanding, and as human beings. And I like what one of my elders, so very blessed to work at Tsow-Tun Le Lum, because I've had lots of amazing people that have taught me many things, and I still learn every day. But one of my elders said to me that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I heard JC said, you know, that he thought that our purpose of our life was to have well-being and happiness. That doesn't mean we're not going to experience other emotions of sadness and fear and anger, but how do we deal with that, and how do we not? Part of what I think has happened is because there was no one that back. I'll use myself. When I was growing up, there was no one that taught me how to cope with this stuff, and so I hid it, pushed it down and hid it inside of me. But really, if and I know it might seem funny, but if you see a deer and a deer has gotten scared, it freezes, right? So we have this ability, either we fight, flight, we run, or we freeze, and a deer generally freezes. And when the danger passes, that deer has that innate ability to shake it all off. Well, as human beings, we probably had that ability, but somehow we've stopped. And that shaking is us letting it go. The tears is us letting it go. Sometimes we need a scream, right? Depending what it is. And I think that Creator and creation has provided everything for us that we need to heal, but we need to find what that is. And for each of us, it's not the same path for all of us, like, because we are unique and we are individual. But I know for a lot of our people, it is the culture that calls to us. It's the land that calls to us. You know, but some people can go and they can sit with the counselor. So both, it depends, but we need to find, I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to find what works for us. And we need to not be afraid to allow that pain to go. Because that's why I think, like I said it was a coping mechanism, but it was because I was filled with so much pain, and it helped to somehow numb or ease that pain for me. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. And JC, I wanted to ask you about how you think traditional tobacco fits into this of quitting commercial tobacco.
Well, I had a great friend up in the Okanagan. He smoked all his life. He's still smoking like a chimney the last time I seen him. But he switched to growing his own tobacco, and his cough quit. And he smoked, but not as much, because he had to grow it and dry it, cure it, and roll it. So it's all the chemicals in commercial tobacco and the lack of prayer in harvesting. I try to encourage people, if you are smoking, just say a prayer when you light up. Just light a prayer. And light her up and say a prayer. Have a prayer in your heart. You don't have to start rolling on the ground or anything when you're smoking. Just say a little prayer in the heart and carry on. But it's a thing of investigating for yourself. Find out. Because we're good as human beings as finding out things. And especially about ourselves. Why am I like this? Why am I like that? What is my real purpose? My ancestors that were great whalers, all the rest of the people always put the Creator first before they got in the canoe, before they went into the woods or on the beach. They had a prayer in their heart and very mindful about life, and to put the Creator first and find your way to do that. Jim?
Thank you. Yeah. What do you think? So in terms of, preventing youth from starting to smoke or vaping, how do you think we can approach that? Or what do you think the best way to do that is?
I think we need to have conversations, and we need to have teachings, and even I think if they knew the true meaning of what tobacco meant to our people, and why tobacco was used and how it was used as an offering to Creator and the ancestors, and that it was used in a ceremony. And even JC saying now, if you still feel that you need to smoke, then make it a ceremony, because there's so many harmful things in commercial tobacco that I don't, and I can be honest with you, I don't know the difference in the harm with tobacco that's grown in prayer without all the chemicals. And we do grow tobacco here at Tsow-Tun Le Lum, but we grow it for ceremony. It's used in ceremony. It's used in not just the sweat lodge, but in offerings to the land and offerings to the ancestors. So I think having conversations and teaching, and like I'll go back to me, nobody taught me the harms of tobacco, but no one also taught me how to connect with nature and how to connect with myself and how to find healthy ways to release things and to use healthy coping techniques, and to know that how sacred I was. Like, that conversation never happened for me, and I don't know if it's happening for youth right now. I don't know that, and I know people think vaping is better than smoking cigarettes, but I think they're finding that it isn't, and actually can cause more harm. And I think I said this before, like, when people are coping in this way, they're not trying to cause more harm. They're trying to ease the pain. They're trying to ease the burden. They're trying to find a solution to the pain that they're carrying.
Thank you. And I wonder too, you mentioned that you, when you stopped smoking, you picked up running. And JC, you mentioned that your friend, he stopped smoking, he started growing and harvesting tobacco. And so I'm wondering what you think, like, there's movement and there's action, right, in these things that helped you to quit smoking. And I'm wondering, like, how you think, like, what the connection is between movement or some sort of type of action that helps people quit smoking.
I had no anchor and only bitterness and a disunity in myself. So when I went to Round Lake Treatment Center in May 1980, I found what I was missing, the spirit, the creator. So I began to pray and fast right from Round Lake to, I haven't fasted in the last couple of years, but it really helped me to grab my main purpose in life and to realize what I was missing. And my hockey and baseball had to take a back seat. But I naturally just went towards the culture once I sobered up and began to pray and fast. Then I had the real thing. I had my real self, and not this, that, or the other, just a clear purpose of who I was and why I was here. And to be able to have something like that doesn't have to, because everybody has their own journey and I can't dictate or suggest, but it's there when you begin to investigate for yourself and to have those teachings available, rather than, I didn't quit drinking until I was 35. I'm 76 now and starting to get it. So, true.
And just considering what you're saying about, like, an action. So as human beings, we're made up of spirit, we're made up of physical, we're made up of mental, and we're made up of emotional. That's what makes us a whole human being. So we can't just decide something in our mind. It has to take all parts of us in. And just because we decide something, we do need to, it's just like when we let go of grief or whatever it is we're letting go of, we need to fill ourselves with something else. Whether that's having more love for ourselves, more kindness, more patience, whatever that is. Maybe it's interacting with people, not isolating anymore. So whatever that is for each person, there does need to be an action, because you need to replace it with something. If you just try to quit without doing something else, I think it's really hard to be successful. I guess that's what I'm saying. And people really need to decide for themselves that this is not right for them, that this is causing them harm, that it's not doing what they intended it to do. And then I think people will make that change when they're ready to make the change. That's the hope that I hold in my heart.
Mhm. And I think, from our last webinar that we had with JC, I remember him saying that, smoking cigarettes was a quick fix, right? To deal with that anxiety in the moment as it came up. And as I listen to both of you talk, what I'm hearing is that to, stop smoking or to deal with any addiction, it's not going to be a quick fix, right? It takes a lot of time and personal investigation. And so I'm hearing that when we're doing this, we need to have a lot of patience and compassion for ourselves and for others that are, trying to do this.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so we did have a question from someone. So Gladys says, how does someone start to make connections with those who use ceremonial tobacco? I personally do not have connections and am assisting with gathering a women's group. How do we start a walk in this direction?
Where does Gladys, depends what territory where Gladys lives, because I couldn't answer that right off the hop, but yeah. And I know this guy's got lots of connection to cultural and spiritual people all over.
Gladys is in Malahat.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well, she's not that far from us.
Every Sunday at 2:00 in the afternoon, we have a pipe ceremony. And we've asked people all across Canada and down in the States and up north, Yukon, to also light up or say a prayer. If people don't have a pipe, just to pause and say a prayer at 2:00 every Sunday. And that's the great use of tobacco and helps even when you don't realize it's helping, it helps. When people pray, especially when they pray together, it really, people don't feel any different a lot of the time, but things happen when you pray for people. So we've got a group every Sunday at 2 p.m. in Nanaimo at our sweat lodge, and only 6 of us gather there. But sometimes other people come just to pray and share some food and then leave. True.
I also want to say, I talked about Tsow-Tun Le Lum having a phone line that people can call. So if Gladys wanted to have a more in-depth talk with Mr. JC, just to ask questions, I can offer the phone number that she could call and she can request to talk to JC, and then we could make that happen. So I don't know if she's interested in that, so.
Sure. And then too, Larissa is she said that sounds wonderful. And Larissa has also said that Malahat planted tobacco last year in their garden. And so contacting the health director, Paula, would be a good start as well.
Okay. Okay, and then the number for people to reach cultural support or counseling or clinical support through Tsow-Tun Le Lum is 1-888-403-3123.
Okay, awesome. We'll type that in the chat there too. So it is 1:49, and I just wanted to give people the opportunity to ask any more questions if they had them. But I also wanted to say that as we've talked about quitting commercial tobacco, what also has come up is learning about the traditional teachings of ceremonial tobacco. And so 2 weeks ago when we heard about from you, JC, about traditional use of sacred tobacco, that was the first time I ever heard about it, or had heard someone speak about it in that way. And I heard you mention that too, when you stopped quitting, it was when you realized that this was tobacco was a sacred medicine too. And so I just wanted to thank you for sharing that, because I think how we, one way that we also prevent youth from starting smoking commercial tobacco is sharing this knowledge and sharing these stories. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I think it does make a big difference.
Great.
Yeah. Is there anyone that had any other questions for JC and Nola.
I thought I saw something flash across the screen, someone asking if the pipe ceremony is televised, and it isn't. It's not
Mhm.
televised.
Okay.
So just
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
But you can't miss it if you want to come. There's a big flashing neon sign there.
Where is it again?
he is no. He's using his humor right now.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's at 477 or 475 10th Avenue, Nanaimo.
Is that open to anyone?
Pretty much, we have to keep our distance, and it's a small area. So, and but yeah, people are welcome to come. You can't be on your period, your moon, sisters,
Mhm.
because of the energy and the teachings around that. 4 days before or to 5 days after, or when you're really sure you're clear.
But I think if people couldn't physically come, they could also know that that's happening at 2 o'clock every Sunday, and that they could be in prayer too, to connect into that bigger energy. Because as he said, it's not just happening there, it's pipe carriers all across Turtle Island that are doing this. The time's been set, and probably almost since COVID started,
Yeah,
shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
That they're doing it.
Okay. Perfect. Janice, I seen you wave your hand. Did you have a question?
Yeah, it's not more, I don't know if it's a question, but I just wanted to share my experience with smoking. I'm not a big time smoker. I've smoked on and off throughout my life, but I just wanted to thank Nola and JC for sharing your guys' experiences, and just add a bit about trauma. I know from my most recent experience, when my brother passed away almost 4 years ago, I noticed, like, the one thing that somebody asked me, one of the first things I remember a family member asked me was, what do you need after, like, the day that my brother passed? And it was a really traumatic experience on our family, because it was sudden and it was just unexpected, and it just shouldn't have happened, but unfortunately it did. So the first thing that came out of my mouth, I don't know why, but I was like, I need a smoke. I need a smoke, because my levels were like just out of control, like my energy, my stress levels, just that overwhelming grief and shock. And then I was just like, I didn't understand that. I was like, why is my body craving a smoke? So I smoked for like 4 months. But what I noticed was that my body started to reject it. The more work I did on my grief, I guess, around grief and healing, I even went to the woods and I screamed as much as I could to get that, whatever I needed to get out. So I did a lot of crying. You mentioned about healing, a lot of tears, let those tears flow so you can start that healing. But, like, I guess my one thing that I would like to see more is to ensure that those alternative methods are there and available to avoid those resources that we tend to go to, or those tools that we tend to use that are not so good for us. Like, I know we eventually brought in brushing and that helped, but I don't know, my body just wanted a smoke. It just went straight to that. And that was the only thing that could calm me. But once I started calming down, I started feeling sick when I was smoking. My body started rejecting it. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my experience with smoking, and just understand that there's more out there to help you move through that grief. Sure.
Thank you.
And about the younger people starting to pick up things like smoking and whatever it is, vaping, smoking, other things. There's a lot of shame and guilt sometimes, and hard to reach out when those things are there. And the peer pressure and the family secrets, whatever it is, it's hard to get started and to make a decision to go down to open that door and go down that path. I really encourage the young people and anybody else to really look at guilt and shame, because a lot of that is not our fault, that those things that we're guilty about or ashamed of. And that's all I have for now.
Mm.
Sure.
The other thing I was thinking about what Janice said, so cigarettes does do something in the brain and the body, but I think when our systems go into that kind of shock that she's talking about, smoking is a physical thing. Like we have it, we hold it in our hands, we take it in, we feel it going into our body, and it helps us stay present. Remember I said I use smoking so that I could stay here. And like Janice said, there's other things that can help us stay present, but it's really quick, right? Because there's people there that'll, you think, oh my God, this is what I need. We go back to old, especially in times of high stress and shock, we go back to old coping techniques. So it's always good to have somebody there that's able to help you. And luckily for Janice, 4 months isn't a super, I'm sure she would have preferred not to use cigarettes, but it is not a long time. So I think we're all saying the same thing. We are and saying too, there is other ways. And I think for people that don't know that there's other ways, that's something that could give them hope, especially because I think there's people that want to quit but don't know how to quit, don't know what they could do, know that it is probably causing them harm. So
Can I do a chant to close?
Yes, absolutely.
A very simple chant about the Creator will help those that believe in the Creator. The Creator will open a way, open a door for those that believe in the Creator. And the last part was just addressing the most great light, the most great spirit. And I'm thinking about all these people that smoke or have other problems, because I know we're all connected. We're all one. True.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to extend my gratitude to both of you for joining us today and for sharing your teachings. I am always, very taken away when we can create these kind of spaces online. And so I'm, again, just very grateful that you are able to be here today. So yes, thank you very much. And before we end, I just wanted to say a few things very quickly. So Larissa Koser, who we've been partnering with, there is a Respecting Tobacco program. And so if you need any support with that programming, Larissa put in her contact information. So please contact her if you do need help with that. And another thing too is we would really appreciate if you could fill out our survey. It just kind of lets us know how we're doing and guides any future programming. So we would really appreciate that. And again, just wanted to say thank you. And our next webinar is in 2 weeks, so October 29th, and it's about Indigenous harm reduction and cannabis use. So that's all I have to say. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, cool.